natural resources and how it improves the money. We don't think that's the case that runs, because I think I would already outflame that. But beyond that, because I think permanent authorities are already not in that desperate need of money, we think that's bad. But lastly, let's talk about again the alternative. Let's concede, or let's assume that for any reason the opposition bench may say they need this kind of ambassadorship because it's important to society and etc. We think the alternative panel is that let them use the lower echelon expertise, but not the prominent ones. Why? Because the lower echelon ones are ones in need of that luxury materialism that these guys may want to portray things like more money or more celebrity. But beyond that, they are not as gods, and as such, their harm cannot be that big to the society because they are not looked at as gods. So there's some form of analysis and some form of how's it called? Some form of examination, and to look at their ideas so that people can be able to question them, right? So you think, oh, sorry, I couldn't take a people by time as that lapse. That's bad. But yeah, but maybe I will take you. So right. So you think that way would be a better solution. So what these guys ought to defend to us panel in this debate, they need to show to us why shouldn't we use the other maybe lower kind of celebrities, right? That could need whatever they can present as opposition, right? But at the same time, why not causing that much deep entrenched harm of exploitation to our ignorant and vulnerable public, right? But then capitalize and use the already prominent ones that don't need like that much prominency, but beyond that, use them as a vehicle to exploit their own professionalism while going to the detriment of society, while also going fundamentally against their own value beliefs or norms. That's because of the public interest, or that's because of the publicization of all those kind of political stance and nuances. We think that's bad. That undermines your human dignity as a prominent authority. We are very proud to stand for that, stand for our dignity, but that to not be used as a vehicle to the rise of our own society. Very proud to propose.
Prime Minister, for that fine speech. Shall we have the leader of opposition? Here.
Hi, am I audible? Someone could confirm. Am I audible?
Audible.
All right. Right, I'll start in a few seconds, just setting up my timer. All right, starting in analytic POS in the chat. Please do not unmute yourself until unless I ask you to do so. I'll ask for a POS shortly. Starting in 3, 2, 1. This debate is not about whether public scrutiny should exist on these prominent actors or not, right? Because that is what the OG's premise is. I'm going to break that premise down for you. Because understand, when you are a prominent a sports person, the public scrutiny is always going to be on you. And in this rising day and age where social media and the media itself is going stronger with each day, I think public scrutiny will always exist for you in both worlds, in governments as well as oppositions. This debate is about whether you as the sports person, as a famous sports person, should go ahead and be cognizant of actions and believe that your actions should be held accountable or not. I think that is what the debate is about. Should you care about what your actions might go ahead and bring about certain consequences to society? Should you care about those actions? Should you not care about those actions? I think scrutiny is symmetric in both worlds. They can't run this particular case in this debate. But what makes you prominent? I think the people themselves make you prominent at all points in time. Why? Because understand, a prominent sports person is someone who has beaten all sort of hardships, literally has worked their asses off, have put in so much effort, literally, and these are sometimes even these people are coming from the minorities backgrounds who have gone ahead and become famous sports person. All blacks in America, they have gone ahead and broken down structural oppression and structural racism to become the prominent sports person they are at all points in time. So the hardships that we have gone through to become this prominent sports person are immense, and I think that is something that needs to be upheld at all points in time. Because if you don't do that at a point in time when you don't care about your action, when you don't care about the consequences of your actions, you don't believe in the notion that your actions will bring about certain pragmatic consequences in society, you give away the idea of sports in general, right? When you become prominent, you are already conceding that some part of your life has gone to the public, and the lines between professional and personal life have been blurred to a large extent. Right? I think that is why in this particular debate we tell you that it's in the interest of this particular actor to become more cognizant about what they do, because understand them being put on a pedestal is going to be symmetric in both worlds. The media's eyes are going to be symmetric in both worlds. They can't assert in this debate that backlash will only come about in opposition. Backlash will come about in both worlds. But I'm going to tell you why backlash is going to be worse off in government in my constructive speech. But before that, they say that, listen, why I should probably give this money to the player from lower, like who are not so prominent, and that's why they should have the capital to exercise that. I don't understand why it is in the incentive of the actor to give this particular platform to earn money to those people who are not prominent. They have to mechanize that impact probably doesn't stand. And they say that, listen, some new player will come after me, so I should not go ahead and grab this opportunity to earn money because it's going to be a constructive. It tell you that at all points in time, just because I get a job right now and I know that after 10 years, some new person will come up and I will be forced into retirement or I'll be fired for that. That does not mean that I'll not take my job. At that point in time, the primary consideration for this actor and me is going to be is to earn money in present time and not care about what happens 10 years, because in 10 years, I'll probably have earned that level of money that I can sustain myself. They have to go ahead and concede that sustainability is getting harmed in their world. But before I jump into anything, I think 4 constructives in our speeches. Firstly, we take that the aspirational value that people have attached to you because you've overcome all those sorts of hardships is something that you need to uphold at all points in time, right? Because if you take away that aspirational value, then children are going to see the darker side of what you are supposed to do. So if I an actor don't believe that my action should have any consequences, then I'll probably go ahead and take drugs. Why will I take drugs? Because I think at all points in time, your belief system dictates how you act in public. So if my belief system is that I don't give a damn about anything else, I think that will dictate how what my actions will be, what my decision making rationale will be at all points in time. If I don't care about what people think of me, I think at that point in time I'm more likely to take those actions which are not supposed to be, in the right thing or in the right moral deed. It's probably going to be something like I'll drink a lot, I'll probably do drugs, and I'll just take I'll do things which are not in line with what the society's moral good needs in and of itself, right? I think that aspirational values at all points in time is broken on government because you don't hold yourself as an athlete accountable, and that's an exceptionally harmful thing. Because understand this, and this is the second constructive, that backlash and regret is something that's worse off in love. As a sports person, I do not want to go ahead and just as a human being, I don't want backlash and I don't want to live in a cycle of regret, because at a point in time I probably take drugs and I don't care about the actions, and it's and because of the fact that media scrutiny is always going to be there on me, and when people get this idea that I am taking drugs, to people who look up to me are also likely to go ahead and get forced into this idea that maybe taking drugs is okay. And when they do that and something bad happens, I am more likely to fall into a cycle of regret, because that is the narrative that I have gone ahead and validated in society, right? And that regret and the subsequent backlash that I'll get for my actions and its subsequent consequences is something that this is exceptionally harmful for the player's image. That is an actor incentive to tell you that player's image is getting harmed off in government. And this is easier for when you're coming from a minority community, right? I think minority communities are specifically targeted when it comes to the backlash against them. So if you're a player from a black community, you're probably like to get more backlash from the conservative media as opposed to anything that the government says. Before going on, I take closing government. Go on. Moving on, we tell you that when you are coming from a black community, you are more likely to be targeted. So if you are
Can
a
I
black,
still go?
No, it's protected time now. When you are coming from a person who's a black community and you start taking drugs, the media paints a narrative against you that by saying that, listen, maybe all black people take drugs, right? That is the kind of narrative that media goes ahead and generalizes on you when you're coming from minority communities, coming from those communities which are easily victim criminalized in this particular system of injustice, right? And at that point in time, we tell you that it's the backlash against your community and backlash against you is going to be specifically harmful for this actor. And when that happens, the community, your community will literally ostracize you at all points in time. But we tell you that you will go ahead and de-incentivize young people from joining the sport because your actions, now parents will see your actions and they'll stop their young children from going ahead and playing sports because you are a bad influence. Lastly, the idea of monetary, right? We tell you that the idea of monetary and the benefit of capitalism is something we can get on our side because now companies at all points in time want people who have the good image in society, who are holding their actions accountable to themselves. Because that's what the companies want to do their marketing on. At that point, I will tell you that money is something that will flow better on our side, and that's an actor incentive to get more money. They can't say that actors don't want money. I think sports people at all points in time want that level of fame, want that level of validation, and want that level of money. And because of all those reasons, we're proud to oppose.
Hello.
You're audible.
Okay, so should I get into my speech?
Shall we have the Deputy Prime Minister? Here.
Okay, perfect. I will start speaking in 3, 2. I would like to see the timer, please. 1, and I'll start right now. Perfect. Panel, what you hear from side opening opposition is what we call lazy debating. Why do we call it lazy debating? Because they engage in the trivialities of our case instead of actually debating the real matter in this particular debate today. So we think that automatically opening opposition should take a fourth. Why do we think that opening opposition should take a fourth? We think that on our side of the house, we're not saying that celebrities or these particular athletes should not care about anything. In fact, we think that people ought to care about whatever it is that is affecting society and all of that stuff, right? But where we disagree is that you have to put this particular title of ambassador on a person, thereby taking away their freedom of thought, their freedom of conscience, and their freedom to be who they say that they are, right? So finally, we tell you that in the example that we've been given in this particular debate today, someone decides that they don't want to take the vaccine for their own religious reason. What this particular debate, therefore, is saying that for an ambassador to be an ambassador, right, they have to base their decision on what will affect society and all of that stuff, right? And we think that doesn't make sense because it basically erodes the whole essence of being yourself or being an individual, right? Finally, we don't think that this is all right in any circumstance. We think that celebrities are still human beings just like you and I. We think that at the point where we recognize this particular athlete, even though they are a prominent figure, as a human being, they should therefore be allowed that freedom to be themselves, the freedom to dignity, the freedom to consciousness, and the freedom to believe whatever they want to believe by the mere fact that they're a human being. That is the side that we're on today, panel. Panels, what they basically present our argument to be is we are a team that's saying, oh, no, you should not care about anything. Oh, no, you must just care about the greater good. We think that number one panel, this particular debate is very difficult to debate. Why? Because of the impossibility of someone being an ambassador, right, of something. Let's take their case, like their best case, right, whereby I say that you need to care about society, you need to think about how it's going to affect society and all of that stuff. What they forget is that a lot of the things that happen within our minds is very subjective. They come here and debate as if there's an objective truth that exists, and we come to tell you that there is no objective truth. If I, as a person, believe that the vaccine is the mark of the beast, and I am a Christian and I believe that everyone needs to be saved so that they go to heaven, if I'm then going to be thinking about the greater good of society, then I'm thinking society must go to heaven instead of going to hell. And so my idea is actually based on the greater good of society. So panel, we ask the question that on which side, on what metrics do you then use to say that this is going to be good for society? And we tell you that the idea that things are very subjective to certain people, even if I'm an ambassador and I'm saying that I'm doing something for the greater good, I could be an ambassador, but what is for the greater good is not actually for the greater good. The second assumption that you hear from side opening opposition is this idea of how whatever is good for the majority or whatever the democracy wants is exactly the way to follow, right? How do we tell you that people voted for Donald Trump? People came out in their masses to go and vote for Donald Trump. That was a very bad decision, panel, just because the majority wanted to do that particular thing, or just because it then came out that this is what we wanted. Or let's look at Brexit, for instance, where people then decide that no, Brexit was a very bad was a very bad idea, right? But people came out in their masses and then voted for Brexit. So we think that is a point where even you want to consider what the general public thinks or what is going to affect the general public. What metrics can you therefore say, can you use to say that this is going to affect the general public? We don't think that an objective truth exists in this particular debate and that therefore ought to be taken into consideration. So panel, we think that opening opposition presents a world is very performative, right? We say that they want to create a world where R. Kelly comes out and he says that, oh, I can see the rainbow, oh, sounds like a victory, things like that. But in the sidelines, he's raping women and children, right? So panel, we tell you that it doesn't really make sense for you to say that you must be an ambassador, you must base your personal decisions on such and such and such a thing, because what you're creating is tokenism, what you're creating is performative activism, and it's not actually changing the world to be a better place, right, panel? But one thing that you hear from Edgar that is very important in this particular speech today is this whole idea that when you then make a prominent person, right, base their decisions on how it's going to affect so and so and so and so, right, we think that you're not allowing people to be able to actually buy into this particular thing. We think that you're using a person to try and sell your whole idea. We think that it's not ethical in the first instance, that when we look at influencer culture, it's not ethical because we're actually forced to believe something. So just because I deify or I worship Messi, when Messi comes out to say, let's go and get the vaccine, I must put aside my own religious beliefs to be able to do that particular thing. Part of we think that it creates a world that is not strong. We think that it creates a world that is very brittle and a world that can easily fall when we make athletes or when we make celebrities or people who are prominent figures gods within our society, that whatever they say is supposed to go. We don't think that makes particular sense to this particular debate right panel. So what exactly do you hear from our side of the House panel when it comes to this particular debate, right? We're talking about the issue of subjectivity, right? And we tell you that you're not going to be able to come up with what is good for everyone else. But also in this particular debate panel, we highlight the issues that have been faced by Naomi Osaka, the issues that have been faced by Simone Biles. We tell you about what's been happening with Sha'Carri Richardson, right? Whereby if you take a person, because we're identifying these particular people as human beings like you and myself, right? Whereby Naomi Osaka decides, no, I can't compete in Wimbledon. I can't compete in this particular thing because of the sake of my mental health. When we place the good of the world, or when we make Naomi Osaka or Simone Biles to be the Superman that's supposed to save the whole world, we want to analyze what that kind of pressure does to a single person, right, panel? So how do we tell you that it's number one unethical for you to place the whole do that. But number two, the weight of the world is being placed on these particular people. So panel, we're standing on the side of saying that people must be very ethical in the way that they approach these particular athletes. We're saying that tells you that these particular athletes, even though they're prominent, because they're also human beings. They're human beings in the sense that number one, they cannot be given the responsibility to make good decisions all the time, because it's very impossible for you to always be making good decisions. Number two, our side of the house is not saying that you must not care about anything. It's saying that you must care about things that are important to you. But the point whereby you feel that you don't want to take the vaccine because of your own religious reasons, no one should be able to force you to tell you that no, you don't care about the vaccine because of the prominence that you have. Because number one, the truth is not objective. The truth is very subjective. So who in this particular debate gets to decide what is good for society? If the rest of society says today we want to get the mark of the beast, and I'm not saying that the vaccine is the mark of the beast, we must not then just say, oh, let's go with what society says, because who decides what the truth is in this particular debate? Panel was standing on the side that tells you that human dignity is very important, that the people's sense of self ought not to be eroded just because they are prominent figures or because their influence is beyond that, right? Panel, we told you that the idea of making someone an ambassador can be very, very harmful. Imagine that you're an athlete, right, in 2021, you're pushing things such as LGBTQ rights and gender rights and all of those things. And then 5 years later, you get mutated or something of the sort and you're no longer an athlete and you start showing your true colors. Panel, we think that these particular movements are shot in the foot and are not able to move on because of those particular reasons, right, panel? Panel, we think that if a movement is going to be able to grow within society, it should have organic buy-in. That is, people should not have to believe in something because a prominent figure believes in that particular thing. We think that if you really want people to be vaccinated for the right reasons, to not turn against you, you must allow people to make their own decision for them to get vaccinated. We think number two, that these athletes are human beings and therefore they deserve all the rights that a human being ought to have. We think that it's very unethical in this particular debate today to come and say that because someone is an athlete, they are no longer a human being. They do not have the right to self-consciousness. They don't have the right to believe in whatever they want to believe. And we stand for democracy, and that a person should be allowed to believe whatever they want to believe, in spite of the fact that they're a prominent figure. And with that, we beg to win.
Prime Minister, for the fine speech. Shall we have the Deputy Leader of Opposition to close the opening house? Here.
Hi, am I audible? Just confirming. Chair, am I audible? Chair, just confirm once.
Yes, you're audible. I can hear you.
Is the chair, am I audible to the chair? Just want to confirm that. Sergio, am I audible? Could you confirm, Sergio, am I audible? Can't. Oh, cool. Great. POS through chat after the 5th. Starting. I have no preferred gender pronouns. So, yeah. And I'll definitely try taking one from closing, but I do have a lot of material. So, yeah. I'll call for probably one after 5:30. Starting my speech in 3, 2, and 1. When opening government's case is extremely funny. They argue that look, people should be cognizant of their actions because at all points in time you need to do good for society, but you also need to have a private life for yourself. I don't know why they both exist together at all points in time. Insofar as the framing is clear, the point at which you go ahead and become that prominent athlete, you make certain kind of concessions. I have two framings which literally outframe everything that opening government has said in this debate. We think one, choice is anyways limited for these individuals insofar as these individuals in and of themselves will make the informed choice of not having a choice at all points in time in their lives in the future. Which is to say that one, you have already spent a lot of time to become that. So insofar as you have given up on your personal life and the needs of your personal life, living with your parents, living with your families, and probably going abroad, training on the field for hours, and not living a personal life, that at all points in time means that these individuals have made certain degrees of concessions to their lives to become a prominent actor in the first place. That's first. Secondly, we think you have already decided that you have already dedicated a lot to this kind of sport, so that at all points in time means that this becomes your singular focus insofar as you have become prominent, i.e. the reason why you are prominent is because of the fact that you are associated to this sport and not because of the fact that you have a good private life insofar as your capital within the sport is so much that you have conceded to certain things that exist in private life. The problem then becomes opening government is they tell you that choice should exist. They never really tell you why choice is something that this prominent actor, i.e. this athlete, desires for at all points in time. Insofar as they've already proven to you why choice is not an a priori incentive for the actor in this debate, insofar as some concessions exist that this actor has already made to go ahead and become that prominent in the first place. I have 5 layers of benefits which literally take down everything that comes from opening government. Firstly, let's deal with the idea of just the idea of aspirational value. We think the point at which you become just an athlete in the first place and the point at which you become prominent, that at all points in time means that you have this extra responsibility of catering to a large number of people, which is to say that at all points in time they follow the kind of actions you do. So if DPM has to say that look, these actors becoming god-like figures is a bad thing, we think one, it necessarily happens on both sides of the house insofar as you are judged at all points in time for the kind of actions you do in the field. We think the concept of cult icons already exists on both sides of the house because this romanticization of sportsmen within sports just exists. Problem then becomes of whether you need to reflect those kind of actions into your real life insofar as whether your action should dictate the kind of thing that people do and whether these individuals, i.e. the actors, should have considerations to go ahead and care about this person. I think if OG's first idea is that look, after 10 years this actor is probably going to become irrelevant. Angad proves to you that look, you probably want money right now insofar as in the interim you get benefits out of the capital you gain. So a certain degree of capital that you get gives you more autonomy insofar as the exercise of capital means that you can bring about change in society and fulfill the goal of why you became a prominent actor in the first place. The second mechanism, which takes on the argument of sustainability also, I think after 10 years, even if you get irrelevant, now probably you have more incentive to remain relevant insofar as you want to establish a legacy for yourself where you do actions, where you do things like charity, insofar as you want to go ahead and become relevant and remain relevant. We think this incentive probably makes individuals cognizant more, and I think this is where the trade-off of choice becomes justified because individuals individual then gains that legacy and legitimacy, and probably the reason why that individual ever became prominent in the first place. This is the biggest problem coming at opening government. They never really recognize why choice is something that this actor desires for at all points in time. This is why we argue to you that the perception of sport in and of itself is going to change on the opening government's world, insofar as there is an elitism that is attached to sport, because at all points in time, individuals within minority communities or just athletes who are trying to come up and probably haven't been able to do so, probably now think that, look, these sportsmen are restricted to their spaces and not really coming out and doing certain kind of actions, insofar as these individuals probably only care about themselves, not about these actors. Insofar this is true, what probably now happens is that there is an elitism value that is attached to sports. So at all points in time, you as the actor have no responsibility and you never really fulfill your motive of going ahead and inspiring more individuals to opt into sport. This directly frames, and this directly ties back to the idea of legacy and why this actor wants to live a legacy, because this mechanism of legacy comes from a place where you probably have been an individual which inspires more individuals to take up the sport, and I think that then becomes a net benefit which takes out everything that opening government wants to argue in this debate. What else then do I have in this speech? On backlash and regret, we argue to the panel that one, on opening government's world, you are, at all points in time, you are going to have backlash and regret. DPM says, oh look, there is no objective truth that exists. Insofar as there is no objective truth that exists and individuals probably have subjective needs, I think then it's literally a concession to anything that PMS said, because it's not a coerced mechanism for individuals at all points in time, because media literally tells you of what an objective good necessarily is. So if DPM said that, look, oh, there is subjective interpretation of what this thing looks like, even if that argument is true probably in a utopic world, we think the problem becomes that media constantly forces you to have this perversive narrative. Insofar as media isn't going to go away at opening government, problem then becomes that whether you go ahead and pander to the media more, insofar as you become cognizant of the kind of action you do, because probably you're not going to be held accountable for it. I'll take closing government. Shoot. Closing government. Closing government.
All right. So, yeah.
All right. So
government.
what I need you to differentiate, right, between the job of a sportsman and any other job, say a teacher, a fireman, right? What is the difference between?
Yeah, right. It's not just about a sport, right? It's also about the fact that you have become prominent. So insofar as you become prominent, probably have become a prominent politician, or you have probably become a prominent individual within society, we think the problem becomes that you yourself had dedicated a lot. This then means that now you have acquired capital out of that dedication, and then you have a principal responsibility as the actor to give back to society. Insofar as this responsibility comes from a place where it gives the actor some sort of fulfillment to go ahead and bring about change in society. We think this value of fulfillment is something that rebuts everything that comes from opening government, insofar as they're never able to prove to you why choice is something that this actor desires for and not necessarily something that this choice exists. Please mute yourself. Problem then becomes, we think, on backlash and regret, it's mute yourself. Can you please pause the timer? Can you please pause the timer? Yeah, I mean, please don't interrupt. Yeah, chair, can I get a minute? It's extremely distracting. Hi, can I get a minute? Hi, am I audible to anyone?
You're audible, Mark.
Yeah, cool. Okay, okay, you can probably, how much time is left? Just give me a second. Okay, 30 seconds are left. I think that should be fine. I'll probably take 30 seconds more. You can resume. Okay, I'll only resume the timer I'll resume the timer in 3, 2, and 1. Panel, insofar as the media exists then on both sides of the house, opening government is never able to prove why this principled justification of going against the media is an a priori benefit for this debate. Insofar as we prove to you that pandering to an objective good, i.e. saying that you do certain kind of actions which pander to the vast number of individuals, and if probably the net benefit is that you have injected a vaccine for yourself, even if it comes with the trade-off of religion, you on a net probably are bringing more fulfillment to society. This means that on the field you are not getting things like regret. This is the last benefit that comes from our side, because there is no mental mental health harm that exists at opposition bench, the point at which you already know that you're doing certain kind of actions which are bringing change in society, and you do not necessarily need to be vague of the kind of actions you do. This is very true because at all points in time, it takes an emotional toll on individuals to go ahead and perform on the field. And I think on a net, probably your performance is also affected on the field. The point at which there's this constant threat of something being hurled at you, that you have done a kind of bad action. This is where the fear of pervasive media at all points in time means that you have to become more cognizant of action rather than any benefit coming from OG. Proud to be on opposition.
Thank you very much. The position for the member of government, please, we seem to have lost you. Can you try reconnecting?
So, Chair, I think he's trying to reconnect. He's having a slight network lagging, so we'll be here. Yeah, sorry for that delay, guys. I have reached out to him. He's coming back online. He's trying to like get a clearer network. So please share exercise some questions. Those are one of the things we see online on the most. Thank you.
because of virtue of collectivism. No panel. We tend to say that philanthrocapitalism of what they've already done, because they're already a prominent athlete, has already acted as a form of reparation for up.
Position.
Am I audible? Am I audible? Can anyone hear me? Please unmute and speak. Panel, am I audible?
I'm sorry for that. Yes, speaker, you're audible. I'm really sorry for that. Yes, you are.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much. So please, if you have POI, kindly type your POI. And for being fair, I would like to take the opening government. But CG, you could try. If I will take you. I will take you. So panel, preferred gender pronoun, whichever one that is very good for you. And okay, so panel, are we starting in 3, 2, 1? Panel, notice firstly that opening opposition didn't even classify or rather engage the major burdens that OG gives in this debate. And on that side, we begin this debate. Panel, notice from our side that the ambassadors that we are talking about are people who are seen as public figures, not people who are respected or ambassadors for job offers. And that is why we need to interrogate this debate based on what they stand for and why the societal narratives would always exist from people to conform to certain things like taking a vaccine, not because they want to, but because you are supposed to, and it becomes problematic when such an individual who has the level of influencing social ideas of people towards them because of personal becomes an issue when he or she has no uniformity in addressing these issues. We also need to understand why should the government not even support this, or why individual biases and there are autonomy to what people want to say, and there are beliefs that limit people from whatever they want to do in some certain issues. But then why this argument is very problematic from OG is because when it comes to societal narrative, it becomes a problem for you to supersede that of your individual strength. That is why religious beliefs and some things of personal beliefs are always subjected to the societal narratives and how the world perceives in certain situations. But no, OG says that religion like Islam do not support people to be vaccinated because it is against their religion. But yet, panel, we all know that before people from Africa can go to Mecca for religious Hajj, you must be vaccinated because that becomes the international rule for you to even get a license to get visa to travel to these countries. And that takes them away from that argument. That is to say that the societal narrative and perception of the issues at hand becomes the major thing we should subject these beliefs and notions and on that clash of autonomy, it takes OG from this debate. Secondly, panel, they come here to tell you that individuals has their right and they would want to have this on whatever thing they want to perceive. That is to say, they have the right to say, this is what I would do in this particular issue. Why is this issue very, very, very relevant in this debate panel? The motion on the hand has to do with vaccination. Why is vaccination very important? And why is it a major issue that is affecting the globe? In a world where we see that people have died as a result of COVID-19, it becomes imperative for us to question the narrative. Why should the individual's autonomy or beliefs on religious ideology should supersede the general thing that will help a society become better? Why should these people say this? That becomes a bigger problem because at the end we understand that the major goal and the major effect at the end of it all is to help the society get better, is to help the society become a good one, and to help society stand within the framework of what has been existing in the society. It becomes imperative for these people to have the social capital in themselves, not necessarily because of the signing or representing of brand, but because of the fact they are seen as motivators by the people who watch them, by their fans. It becomes important for them to take extensive role in making sure that some of their fans and all the people that need to understand this become very important because they play a key major role in trying to shape the narrative of the society towards doing what is right and what is needed for general well-being of the people. But then we need to understand that societal narrative exists to form people and to conform them to certain things like taking a vaccine with issues of COVID-19, not because they want to, but because they are supposed to, not because they are supposed to. And when they do not do this, it becomes problematic. That is a panel. An individual who has that level of influencing social ideas of people should take a stand to talk on these issues, or rather become an ambassadorial person that human beings would understand the need and the major concern for them to do this. Panel, why they shouldn't oppose it? Panel, who feel that opposing this thing is just trying to ridicule the society and put the society into a particular way that makes it seem that individuals that has a right or has what it takes to influence the ideologies of people wouldn't do so. What is the biggest problem in this debate, panel? The biggest problem the OG should understand that this debate is not existing in a vacuum. And in the world of today, majority of the people will naturally listen to these ambassadors, not because of the fact they are players, but because of the fact they have gained a lot of social influence in them and a social capital that makes them to believe that they had a particular stand on whatever that has to shape the society. But then we're not talking about things like gay, LGBT, and the rest of them. These are individuals' beliefs that religion in themselves are not even questioned because at the end of the day, it is individual belief. But for now, we're talking about societal narrative, things that help society to get better, and things that has to do with the shape the way the society thinks and the responsibility of the people towards the society. Having said the panel, we need to also understand what is the major role of this ambassador thing to the people they represent. Why is it important to people who look up to them, and why this should be considered panel? But then one thing we need to understand that when people are considered as ambassadors, it's beyond food, not because of the fact that they are just good players, no, but because of the fact there are some certain things that they do to the minds of their fans who have seen them as people to reckon on to and people to respect when it comes to whatever things they need to do. Panel, outside the field, they are no longer playing football, but seen as role model that has every narrative to change the concepts of the society. Why it becomes a problem when you do not prioritize or give this people that ambassador feel. Panel, they would always want to see that in the world of us, we have our individual autonomy as opposed to the general public and what the society would want to see to help them get better. And that becomes the problem because at the end of the day, panel, we need to understand that we are talking in a society that where this thing doesn't exist in a vacuum. And as an actor also, panel, we need to understand the roles of these people to the individuals in the society who would want to do this or who would want to do it simply because of the fact, quote unquote, it is the ideology or against the beliefs of this individual. Why is autonomy and individual selfish beliefs and individual personal beliefs and opinion should be subjected in this motion panel? This motion is a question that tries to help the general public, not a motion of trying whether you get social capital on the rest of them, because they all already have, whether you're an ambassador to jobs, whether you're ambassador to people, you already have social capital because you rise to your fame through your hard work. it becomes an important question to question why then is the need for them to have this capability and for them to have this social capital towards the minds of people and helping the people that they want to help a society become better in a certain way that it will deal not with what people think and how to help society shape in a major conservative narrative that will help better the society. Oji, let me take you.
Already tells you that moral outcome does not impose an exclusive moral obligation on anybody. So do you think that it is good for society to place their ideals on one person's action?
Thank you, panel. Society is not placing their ideas on one person's panel. Just like you say, moral obligation, moral action does not require a moral obligation. But in this case, it is a moral action that has to question what the society would engage at the end of the day and what the society will benefit. That is to say, it is a thing that affects the general public, the general society, not as an individual basis, but on the general context of what will happen to the general people in the society. What becomes the problem, panel? When they begin to question and pressurize, or rather make their own ideology stand, what it means, panel, is that they subject to society where individuals will always run away from the major thing that will help society because of individual narratives and personal autonomy. That becomes the problem because we are in a society where things do not exist in a vacuum, and because of the fact we need to understand whatever role this model, this ambassador take, it affects people who are already claimant to them, who are the fans, and who hold them in high esteem. And that is why we should subject every moral aspect, individual biases and religious biases, to subjective narratives, because it affects the general public. In a world where we understand that this debate doesn't exist in a vacuum, and therefore it compares what the society reacts to things that should be very, 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 very effective. Who feel that OG are not very, very being fair in their mechanism, and that is why they do not even get what this motion is, and they do not even narrate their argument at the very, very end of it. But then in a world where we understand the need for the society to interrogate and society to become better, we feel that OG's mechanism do not work in this debate, and we're gladly proud to oppose. Thank you.
We thank the member of opposition for that speech. Now I'd like to welcome the government whip to sum up the debate on Gov Bench.
Am I audible? Hello, am I audible for everyone to hear me? Okay.
Yes, Abby, you're audible.
Okay, so a minute, then I'll start. So in case of any POI, use the chat space. I'll try as much as possible to look there, but don't badger me because I'll not take you either way. Okay, so in 3, 2, and 1. So panel, today's motion actually seeks to address 2 key things. Firstly, the necessity of opposing this kind of notion, and also it is our burden as government to actually show you the harms that are permeated by this notion in the society and also for the athletes themselves. Now, on that note, panel, what do we bring in the house as closing government? Firstly, we talk about how when you permeate this notion that actually these prominent athletes should actually be ambassadors, we tend to think that actually this infringes on their right to security and on their right to freedom. And then at a point in time, you actually impose this whole burden that the opposition benches say that because you hold a prominent position, therefore it is your moral obligation to actually act as per what the society tells. We tend to think that this actually is an infringement of right to freedom and right to security. And at a point in time you infringe on this, we tend to think that actually this affects the mental health of these people. At a point in time we have to trade off their mental health just to be ambassadors. Panel, we tend to think that is very problematic and detrimental to these people. Secondly, panel, we talk about how actually at a point in time you say that actually now these athletes now have to hold the collective ideals that the society upholds. We actually view this as this is actually saying that whatever the society advocates for, these athletes should actually advocate for these things. Now, on that note, panel, what we get from the whole opposition bench, including closing opposition, which has no extension, is on the moral obligation of these people to the society. Panel, recognize the fact that actually, before these people become prominent athletes, they are first citizens of this country. At a point in time, these people are also citizens of this country. We think that their right to autonomy, their right to freedom, and their right to security is something that should be paramount and something that should be prioritized. At a point in time where you actually say that because you're prominent, you should do as what the society says. You should live this life that actually it will be actually of a good moral fabrication to the society, something of the sort. We think that actually this is something quite detrimental. Firstly, when the member of opposition says that because you're a prominent figure, you should actually make the society better. Panel, these people do not hold any social contract with the people. These people do not sign any contract with the society that they have the obligation to make the society better. This is where the closing opposition fails actually. They tend to think that actually because these people are prominent, now they have the obligation to make the society better. Because you're well known, you have because you're prominent, you hold the same beliefs as the society. No, we think that these people still have a right to hold their own beliefs. These people have a right to be actually not to believe the same or not to act the same way as how the social conduct actually, the societal conduct upholds. We tend to think that at a point in time, actually, the beliefs of these people is something that it should be actually prioritized in today's debate. Then we tend to think these people have no moral obligation to make the society better. Another thing, panel, we talk about how actually when now you impose this burden of these people becoming ambassadors beyond that field, Perez tells you clearly how this leads to overexposure, in the sense that it is not only the prominent figures who are seen as people who can create awareness on these vaccinations. It is only these prominent athletes who are seen as people who can revolutionize change in the society. Panel, this is something very detrimental because firstly, it creates a sense of actually inadequacy whereby these people do not feel like actually it creates a sense of inadequacy where this actually the normal citizen or rather normal people now feel like they cannot even create awareness because it is only the prominent people who are seen as people who can create awareness, who are seen as people who can create change in the society. And this is something very detrimental. Now, panel, another thing actually, we talked to you how we're at a point in time where you actually, the society feels a sense of entitlement or rather a sense of actually criticism. At a point in time where society feels like they have a right to criticize these people for not living up to the standards that they uphold. We tend to think that this is something that is very, very quite problematic on the side of these athletes. At the same time, actually, society feels now they have a right to actually criticize these people for holding certain beliefs. We think that this is something quite problematic. Now, panel, this is what we bring in the house today. Firstly, we show you how actually this actually notion that these people should be held ambassadors has an effect on the mental health capacities of these athletes. It also has an impact at a point in time where you impose the burden that these people should make a society better. This society should make these people should make society better at the expense of their own autonomy and at the expense of their own freedoms and rights. Now, panel, what does OO bring in the house today? Now, OO talks about how actually about moral obligation, and I think after I've tackled that well by showing you, panel, in as much as these people hold these prominent positions, it doesn't necessarily mean now that they hold the same beliefs as that of the society. In as much as the society looks up to them, Perez shows you clearly that giving back to the society through philanthrocapitalism is enough for these people to show that they are giving back to the society. So at a point in time where you actually hold them
lives of individuals are very important and their personal privacies are important as well. But me as a prominent athlete, I recognize what happens in total school. I recognize there is a shift in the morality of concessions where individuals are calling out systems that are heavily intruding into privacies of athletes, where individuals are saying that even though we think that athletes are ambassadors, let's respect their private spaces. That's exactly what this world look like. Me as a personal prominent athlete, I recognize that is happening and I don't think that that's something that's going to intrude into my personal space. Very, very important, very, very proud to oppose. What OG says is that the idea of freedom. You should be able to express yourself. And this is the beautiful point I wanted to ask them. When you want to be able to express yourself, how best do you get the engagement in and of itself? We think that you get the engagement and for people to be able to understand your perspective when you continue this level of ambassadorship. We don't think that you oppose the system and ultimately get solvency. If you think you want to propagate the idea of liberalism, if you think you want to protect the idea of continuous queer people being emancipated, you don't do that by shunning everybody and saying, oh, I don't want to represent that ambassador system. That's something that's ultimately very important. But it's what you don't get from OG is that OG says, oh, money is not important, but let's use people that don't have money to do these things. Why? Because they need the money. What it means logically is that you recognize that this ambassadorship is one that's going to increase their level of wealth. That means that people that don't have money before, when they do these things, will now have money. Me as a prominent athlete realize that thing that OG doesn't realize, and I'm saying that I don't want to lose that money. But beyond money in and of itself, it's to the extent of how best do you pass your message as a prominent athlete, how best do you maintain sustainability at the end of the day. What you get from CG, apart from the fact that many of the arguments are repeated from opening comments, that they say, oh, only politicians have the ability to be able to do these things because they have knowledge and people don't have knowledge. We don't think that in society that is exactly what happens. We think that individuals are rational and knowledgeable enough. You as a debater is knowledgeable about what exactly liberalism should be. You're not a politician. How exactly do we think that politicians are the only person that should be able to do these things? But you need to recognize that politicians are even the part of the system that are constantly cohesive, that are constantly subjugative, that are constantly pursuing a narrative that doesn't allow for the emancipation of individuals that are minorities, that doesn't allow for the emancipation of individuals that they want to protect their identities. It is very counterintuitive to say that this particular politician should be the one that should be able to protect things like conservative ideas, just like these guys tell you. But then it's very important for you to recognize that the idea of exclusion, these guys say, oh, we are going to exclude some other people that don't have the social capital because this thing is good. We think that is logically fallacious. Why? Because if you recognize that something is good, you don't say let's take away that good thing because not everyone has it. What you say is that let's increase the capacity at which we are giving everyone. You don't agree that something is good and you say that it is bad because it is limited to some individuals. We say from closing opposition that if you consider that it's good, then let's give everyone. We think that that's something that is very, very important in today's debate. When you recognize the idea of principles on social contract, we say that social contract extends and continuously expands on a basis of capacity. That is why we say that even though as an individual that you don't have much, you still have to be responsible to giving back to the society and making sure that society survives. But this is the deep down analysis that the amount of capacity you have as an individual in that society, as it's expanding, your obligations and social contact in that society ultimately expands as well. That is why your VAT and tax as an individual, when you are big and in society, is more than every other individual that exists in that particular places. But that's something that's ultimately very important. So let's talk about this beautiful thing. The beautiful thing is on the evolution of morality. What exists in the school that people are now. Hello, can you hear me? Can you hear me? Am I still audible? I just have 1 minute left.
Yes, you're audible.
Yes, a call came in, that's why. The only way you are able to allow for this continuous evolution in morality, where individuals are able to recognize that the thing that they formerly believed is right is no longer right, or is right and can be wrong at the same time, is when these ambassadors things exist. As a prominent athlete, I want that evolution to continuously exist. Even as Kyrie Irving, who is supposed to be an ambassador, I recognize that, I want to protect my identity. Let these discourses spark in the society that even though I want to be an ambassador, I want individuals to recognize that choices of religions to ultimately be a factor when you want to recognize what exactly people should be standing for. If I'm wrong, the interrogation and engagement will correct me. We have Andrew Wiggins, who has totally used the same excuse, but is not vaccinated. What that means is that there has been an engagement that corrected him as an individual himself. As a prominent athlete, I don't want to lose myself. I don't want to cause harm to myself as well. How best do I pass my message and ultimately correct myself when I'm wrong? We think that it's ultimately very important to ensure for the engagement of ambassadorship for the benefit of this individual. Very proud to come from CEO.
Fine speech. Sorry, member of opposition. Sorry. Shall we have the government's whip to sum the entire case of the government's bench? Here.
Am I audible? Am I audible? Someone should indicate if I'm audible.
Yes.
You're coming. All right, so please some seconds to put myself together and get my papers ready. Thank you. And gender pronouns he, him, or they, or possibly last one, right? So um POIs will be best taken on the test space. Do feel free to drop your POIs on the test space. Again, any of the opposition, don't try to badger on me. Like Kusu was a bit lenient. I'm not always lenient, if you know me. So try not to badger on me. Still hoping I'm audible. Someone should confirm. Thank you so much, Chair. Thank you. Right. So I'm going to be starting off in 3, 2, 1. So, panel, it's very important to recognize that the entire closing opposition is literally out of this debate when they try to personalize this debate and fail to do that in terms of like proper mechanization and all of those things. I'm going to show you why the argument in itself doesn't correlate with the entire happenings of the debate going forward, right? So, next panel is that I'm going to show you why opposition as a team is literally out, particularly from the most relevant thing, which is opening opposition, and how two things takes the argument out, right? Because the first thing opening opposition wants you to buy into the idea that, oh, upon individuals having this culture of prominency, having this idea of capital, social capital, that is a mandatory requirement from them to give back to society, right? They thought to give us a comprehensive account on why that is a necessity, right? What we say from closing opposition, from closing government, right, which you didn't get from opening government, is the idea that upon going into sport, upon individuals diving into sport, they never consented to be charitable, right? Even if they had pros, like even if they have things like a prominency, they never concepted that, oh, when I make money, I am going to give to charity. We don't think that in the vast majority of instances, people consented towards doing that. That is something entire opening opposition failed to recognize, right? The next thing they tell you from opening opposition panel was this whole crazy idea that, oh, that there will be a backlash on these individuals and which will literally lead to regret. Let's show you where regret exists more in this debate panel. Regret exists in the world of opening opposition because what happened is that opposition want to force people or coax people into accepting certain burdens that in itself is going to be anti-world stand for. A little of this we heard from opening government. When opening government tells about other primary identities people hold onto, things like religion, things like family, right? Because we ask a POI who do let themselves hold primary responsibility to, right? We think opening and closing opposition shied away from that argument, right? They owe primary obligation to themselves, to their families, and even to their well-wishers, right? People who motivated them to go into sport in the first place, people who gave them the encouragement to go into sport. These are the people they owe primary responsibility, right? So at every given point in time, they ought to prioritize their own interests and the interests of these people, right? We think they go further away from the constituents of bond, like things like religious boundaries that bonds them and their family and their friends, right? What you do is that you detach them from that love of family, which is more harmful when their family exclude them on the basis of going against what is primarily their ideology, which is their religious belief and all of those things. That is the biggest form of backlash they can ever get. Not societal backlash. You don't care if the West backlash on you as a black kid or as a as a white kid from Ghana, right? And as much as you have a close proximity and a close relationship with your families and your friends and your society, right? You don't care what United States say about you and all of those things. You care about those people who encourage you, who motivated you to go into that act of sport.
or stick them, seeing their family, keeping them on the side, or seeing their family excommunicating them or family or of society or even their friends on the basis of going against their religious standards, all of those things. Backlash is on their word, right? The next thing you hear from their word is about aspiration of value. I think even in as much as we concede to the idea that athletes in themselves will always, elite athletes in themselves will always aspire to things like that. I think those things are inherently tied arbitrarily to their well-being and to what motivated them to go to sport, right? I think what motivated them to go into being a basketball player or a football player itself is arbitrarily different from any consideration that opposition can give you. It might be their loved ones, it might be their wives, it might be their children, it might be their grandparents, like or their mom, like Cristiano Ronaldo did get from his mom, right? We think those aspirations is not entirely tied around society that these guys wanted to buy into. This is a very principle, like this is a very pragmatic and logical argument you get from closing government, right? The next thing we have from closing opposition primarily, very stupid argument is that ambassadorship in itself increase their wealth and increase their money and affluence. Stupidly unresponded to the fact that opening government has already traded that off. Because we think that in as much as you get into sport, you know, ladies and gentlemen, we think you already have money. Even if you don't get endorsement like ambassadorship, you are still being paid, and we think you are paid handsomely and you're okay with the amount of money you get from the club, right? We don't think ambassadorship in itself is going to go a long way, like closing opposition wants you to believe. Ultimately, forgoing what opening government did in terms of characterization was a stupid thing these guys from closing opposition. That is why they are losing. The next thing they say from closing opposition is the idea of contract theory. Recognizing that this is only all responded to the argument you had from my partner. When you say that there is a contract theory of these outlets in themselves to buy into charity and give back to society, we think that in itself is stupendous. The reason why my partner told you that the only people that owns the contract theory is the politicians, right? Is the government, the politicians. Why? Because people voted them into power. People cast their vote. People place their trust on them. So there is some level of give me, I give you relationship, right? We don't actually think that happens within the scope of sportsmen, right? Because sportsmen are literally being encouraged to go into sport, maybe by themselves, due to the hardship of their family. They decide to encourage themselves, or their families encourage them to go into sport. We don't think that ultimately becomes a contract theory with the society. We don't think that is true. What we think is that maybe at some point, sportsmen can decide to be a bit, arms giving. They just want to be philanthropic, right? Not like it's a mandatory requirement that they must give back to society. We don't actually think that, closing opposition can be case. The next thing they told you is about evolution, morality, and all those things. We think revisionists has already proven that morality is like some arbitrary and abstract construct, right? We think at the point in time you buy into it, you ultimately concede to the fact that these niggas, on the basis of their own morality, can decide not to be charitable and give back to society. If their religion fucking say, don't give to anybody, don't even care about anybody, just give to your family and your wife. Okay with that, because that is their own standard of morality. That takes care of their morality argument and all of those things. At the end of the day, this guy doesn't have a case. In our word panel, we think you ultimately create a world in which there is so much burden on athletes to do so good things, right? I think that's pretty much a bad thing. My partner asked a POI, can this sort of burden be seen in any other profession? Because we have professional doctors that are famous in the world, like Ben Carson. We have professional lawyers that are ultimately famous in the world, like Ambrose Ali. Do you place this moral burden on them to do this? We think that in itself is untrue, and we think opposition have not been able to answer that question. Lastly, panel, what this does is that it ultimately takes people out from the center of criticizing oppressive narrative. What it means when you give them this give them that willingness to call out oppressions, because they've already sealed their mouth with the ambassadorship. So being an ambassador, you must always ultimately live, to kind of be a role model that others should ultimately feel. So don't go think about inside global violence or inside club violence and all of those things. Those people live with those perpetual regret. I think that in itself is harmful. At the end of this debate panel, it's crystal clear that these guys from closing opposition are out and failed to engage the argument we had from opening and closing government. Because most importantly, closing government did well to show you why both opening and closing opposition failed to engage the key issues in this debate. That is why they lose. On closing government, we want this goal, we best mechanize the debate and show why this debate in itself is much more beneficial to elite athletes and how it ultimately empowers their willingness to make informed decisions for themselves, because they're the primary actors and the locus of situation in this debate. We win and we progress. Don't talk strongly.
speech. Shall we have the closing word to sum the entire debate for us? Here.
Okay. Am I audible? That's that. Am I audible, guys? All right. Yeah, for POIs, watching the text space. In case you have any preferred pronouns, I'm going to be starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. So the house. Societal relationship is premised on a lot of factors. My time. Am I audible, guys? Okay. Yeah. So societal relationship is premised on a lot of factors, some of which exist within our limit of control and others which exist far outside the limit of control that we have. But more importantly, the intrinsic nature of iconography is one that limits largely how icons or people that identify as these athletes control public perception towards them. So we think it's not within their power to literally control the kind of perception they have from people vis-a-vis how they want them to be in society and the rest of them. But more importantly, in a world where prominent athletes choose to oppose this notion that they should be considered ambassadors beyond their field, the question is, what level of utility does it serve in terms of the kind of message it sends to their fan base and primarily people that subscribe to them? What I'm going to show you from closing opposition is why my partner's case remained the most relevant, right? So the biggest idea you got from my partner is the idea of evolution of morality. Let's take a look at the info slide. And this is the problem with all teams so far, right? Within the info slide already says, right, that Christ cites religious grounds for not being vaccinated, despite repeated eternal pressure to be vaccinated and the rest of them. The question is, in which world would that kind of discourse be sparked to engage for public perception and to engage for public discourse in terms of trying to dispute or trying to settle certain things that happen in society? We think this is a very, very important context of this debate. What we did show you is that in a world